Now we go to the oral presentation. I advise the speakers that each of you have 10 minutes for the presentation and 3 for the discussion. And now Carol Maione, that is working in PhD in the San Diego University State and in Politecnico of Milan. And he presenting monitoring the effect of transboundary water pollution in Imperial Beach, California. Please, Carol, the floor is yours.
Apologize for not being able to join you in person this year. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Could you please confirm you can see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to present about the effect of transboundary water pollution in Imperial Beach with the case study in California, along with my colleague, Dr. Domenico Vito and Dr. Gabriela Fernandez, that should be present as well. So just to give a quick overview of the empirical context. So the study was conducted within the Tijuana River watershed, which is a watershed of a river that originates in Tijuana, Mexico, and flows across San Diego County and into the Pacific Ocean. And the watershed extends for over 4,000 square meters on both sides of the US and Mexico border and is home to almost 3 million people and a wildlife refuge for endangered species. And the watershed management is complicated because it requires binational coordination. And as of now, the river is considered one of the top 5 most polluted rivers in California due to chemical sewage pollution and plastic pollution. And also, speaking more of like the plastic side, also remember that this area is like part of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So we can see like the importance of like conducting research in the area. So the main problem is the presence of like waste and pollution in the river and neighboring areas due to lack of pollution removal and leakage containment targets, lack of consistent cleanup and removal effort, inefficiency of the existing waste retainment infrastructure due to waste overflowing, especially during the wet periods, and finally, lack of consistent monitoring and waste assessment programs. Concerning the methodology that was used for this study, we use an integrated monitoring methodology composed of 4 steps. First, using like historical sources to understand the presence of like hotspot for like plastic and sewage pollution. Moving on to like a panel discussion in which we involve like local experts to better understand what are the areas that are more contaminated, and moving on to remote sensing and looking at the visual anomalies like across different areas along the river and the estuary. And finally, moving on to in situ observations. And today I'm going to present the results of the in situ observations. So the study was conducted into these 5 sampling locations. The first one is the Smuggler's Gulch Canyon, which is a remote and semi-rural area of primary usage is agriculture and industrial. And the main driver of pollution in this area coming from land-based sources are direct littering, proximity of illegal housing with no formal waste management services, and proximity of illegal uncontrolled dam site. For what concerned the plastic waste, the most found were food packagings and container, beverage bottle, cleaning supplies, tires, and housing components. And concerning the chemical contamination of the waste, we found mainly sewage, sediments, and industrial runoff. And here you can see a picture of the first location. Moving on to the second location, the Goat Canyon. This is a remote semi-rural area with mainly agriculture and industrial uses. We mainly found land-based sources of pollution, and its main driver of pollution, we have direct littering, proximity of illegal housing, and uncontrolled dam site as well. And for concerning like the most common plastic waste item, we found again food packaging and containers, beverage bottle, cleaning supply, tires, and housing components. And as well, we found sewage, sediments, and industrial runoff concerning chemical contamination. And here you can see a picture of the second location. Moving on to the third location, the Tijuana River Valley Regional Park. It's a remote natural site. The main function is recreation and camping. we mainly found land-based sources of pollution, like coming from direct littering and proximity of tourism attraction. Concerning the plastic waste item, the most found were food packaging and containers, beverage bottle, and plastic from outdoor and leisure activities. And concerning chemical contamination, we observed sewage, sediment, and urban runoff. The fourth site is South Beach, located in Imperial Beach. It's an urban beach with main uses of tourism, recreation, and fishing. We observed both land-based and sea-based pollution coming from the proximity of tourism and commercial activities, like with direct access to the beach, proximity of housing, direct littering, beach uses, and coastal activities. Concerning the main plastic pollution types observed, we found packaging and container, fishing gears, plastic from outdoor and leisure activities, and tires. And concerning chemical contamination, we found sewage, sediment, and urban runoff. And here you can see some of like the spot in which we conducted beach cleanups. And finally, the last location is the Tijuana River Estuary, which is a beachfront natural area with main use ecological restoration and fishing. We observed land-based and sea-based pollution coming from downstream movement of pollution and coastal activities. And in terms of plastic item observed, we found packaging and containers, cleaning supply, fishing gears, tires, plastic sheeting, and housing component. And for chemical contamination, we observed sewage and sediment presence. And you can see here in this picture, I don't know if it's visible, but the water was yellow from like sewage contamination during one of the days of the observations. And so in general, like we found that the main sources of pollution were like packaging, food, construction, and other sector, for land-based pollution and fishing and tourism for sea-based sources. The main transfer mechanism, like across the river and into the ocean, were through direct deposit, uncollected waste, inadequate disposal, and abandonment and loss. And finally, the release compartment were like released into waterways for land-based sources and released into coastal waters for sea-based sources, and eventually like flowing into the Pacific Ocean. But also it's like really important to discuss the state of Imperial Beach, as it's been like close like to the public since like 2021, but of course like there's still like uses, so we're interested in understanding how this like state regulation can also affect the use of the beach. And for instance, you can see here like many articles that we're talking about like the bad like condition of this beach and like affecting the possible use and coastal activities. And so we were interested in understanding what are the possible implications for human and environmental health connected to those to that condition. And for what concerns human health, like some of the implications were like reduced use of beaches and surrounding areas, and risk from repeated exposure to contaminants. But of course, for people that got in contact with like water and like the environment, especially like surfer, as one of the most famous beaches for surfing activities, they reported rashes and physical condition from contact with water, persistent smell and air pollution, and risks from using tap water and cooking, drinking purposes around throughout the wastewater, the watershed. And for what concerns environmental health, we observe contaminated living environment for birds, fish, and turtles, incidence of fatalities for chemical contamination, both like in the river and at the estuary, the presence of an hospitable environment for nursery and early life stages. As I mentioned before, like the area is home to a wildlife refuge for endangered species, so that was like that's one of the main concerns for the area. And finally, deterioration of prey environment. So for what concerns the conclusion and future research, there is a reported effect from water pollution at the Tijuana River Estuary in Imperial Beach, which include frequent beach closure, which has been pretty much closed every day since 2021, damages to coastal ecosystem, negative impact on the fishery industry in the river and at the estuary, and several effects on human and environmental health. The situation requires urgent measure oriented at coastal management at the mouth of the Tijuana River, and also consistent monitoring and reporting of health effect linked to beach uses. Thank you very much, and I open the floor to any questions. And also my colleagues present in class, if they want to interact, I'm happy to share the floor with them.
Any questions? So I just wanted to say that we did this research in Imperial Beach, which is on the border between US and Mexico. And the reason why this research is very important is because it allows us to better understand where major pollution areas are concentrated. And what we found, and this has been ongoing for some time, the pollution between US and Mexico, a lot of the pollution comes from Mexico due to the geography and topography. But with these kind of research analysis, we can have a better understanding of what is actually happening and how we can develop some policy implementation. But I don't know if anybody has ever been to the US-Mexico border, let's say, area. So we do have a lot of these issues happening, especially when it rains. A lot of the pollution and water and trash accumulates on the border. And so we are trying to create awareness about some of these issues. So I don't know if there's any question. Yes?
Hello, I saw that you have been using observations also, so we were curious about the data collection modalities, if you have envisaged any in-depth participation of citizens through citizen science approaches, so if this will continue in the future with any kind of systematic monitoring involving also citizens.
Yes. So we use multiple methods for data collection, as mentioned before, starting from more like review and trying to understand also like through the help of expert what are like the main hotspots to then like narrow it down. And first we use like remote sensing to understand if there's like any visual anomaly, and then we went like on site to validate our findings for that. And for concerning like the observation per se, we both conducted like direct observation. For some of the sites, as I mentioned before, like the South Beach part in Imperial Beach, we conducted beach cleanup and participatory monitoring with like volunteers, students from our university and like some high school, and also like beach users. And it was really interesting to have like their perspective as like beach like user, what they perceive to be like the main drivers of pollution and how they perceive like pollution throughout time. And finally, we also conducted sampling for some specific location for the plastic waste analysis in those areas. And I don't know if my colleague also, Dr. Vito, wanna speak for like participatory mapping.
We believe what we do in our lab at Metabolism of Cities is we try to advocate for vulnerable communities, and Imperial Beach is in fact located on the US border. So through activities as beach cleanups, we try to create awareness by getting, let's say, the community involved. And as my colleague mentioned, we work with the high school. We try to educate them about what are the SDGs, what is the SDG goal pertaining to oceans, how they can be involved themselves. And with this kind of information, we also develop surveys to ask people, did you know that this water is contaminated, especially after it rains? What are your concerns? Have you had any skin issues? And actually, we found some really interesting information. During this period, we interviewed surfers, which are, very, they're always in the water, very close to the US border. And we found out that they had skin irritations, they had ear infections, and the city of Imperial Beach is aware of these issues. However, they really don't know how else to tackle the issues. There is a waste management facility. However, the issue is larger than it can be withstand, because we have, let's say, the local government, we have the state and the federal, and then also we have the foreign, as Mexico is there as well. So this is much of a larger issue, but research projects as these, where we work with the community, create awareness, and kind of demonstrate what is actually happening, are what we need to be doing, having more storytelling and trying to better understand our cities. I don't know if there's any other questions, or Dr. Vito, if you would like to mention.
Yeah, just quickly to respond to the engagement of the citizens through citizen science. Actually, for this study, but also for other studies, we are using and developed a toolkit to, we can say, systematically involve citizens in taking information. So yes, it's an approach that we are using and developing. Thanks.
Thank you. I wanted to ask the team if you, within your vulnerable population, you had to deal particularly with migrants crossing the border, and if there is any initiative here in Europe regarding the similar aspect of water contamination and migrants crossing through Greece or Italy.
Thank you. I believe this is a really relevant and important topic, especially between the border of Mexico and the US. Currently, last February, we signed a memorandum of understanding with a Mexican university, Universidad Autónoma de Baja California, and the idea is to work on projects relating to different vulnerable groups across the border. So these are topics that definitely we are interested in working on. But yeah, so I believe in the future, more research needs to be worked on borders, not only at the country level, but also borders even within cities, right? Any other questions?
No?